Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
When the knock came at my door, I wasn't expecting it. It was past 8, and I was still in my work clothes, microwaving leftovers, and mentally debating whether I'd spend the night watching a crime docuseries or finally tackle my overflowing laundry pile. But when I opened the door, there was Rachel, my older sister, standing in the hallway with red-rimmed eyes and a look on her face that screamed heartbreak and rage. She didn't wait for me to invite her in. She pushed past me into the living room, clutching her phone in one hand and a crumpled tissue in the other. "You've got some nerve," she spat, spinning around to face me. "Rachel, what's going on?" I asked, confused and caught off guard. "Don't act like you don't know," she snapped, holding her phone up like it was Exhibit A in some trial I didn't know I was a part of. "Aaron told me everything. How long has this been going on?" The way she said his name, Aaron, made my stomach drop. Aaron was her husband. Her perfect husband, or so I'd thought. 6 years of marriage and not a crack in the facade, at least not one that I could see. I hadn't spoken to him in months beyond casual pleasantries at family events, so whatever she thought I'd done made no sense. "Rachel, I have no idea what you're talking about," I said. She shoved her phone into my hands. "Then explain this." On the screen were text messages. Long, intimate conversations between Aaron and someone whose name, to my shock, was saved as mine. The messages were flirtatious, sometimes explicit, and undeniably damning. My pulse quickened as I scrolled through them, trying to process what I was looking at. This isn't me," I stammered, but Rachel was already shaking her head. "Don't lie to me," she said, her voice cracking. "You've always been jealous, haven't you? You could never stand that I had something good in my life." "Rachel, listen to me," I said, trying to stay calm, even as panic crept into my voice. "Those texts aren't from me. I don't even have Aaron's number saved on my phone." "Oh, come on," she scoffed, snatching the phone back. "You expect me to believe someone magically impersonated you? Aaron's not stupid, and neither am I. I swear to you, Rachel, I would never do this," I said. "You're my sister. I love you." But she wasn't listening. She stood there, staring at me like I was a stranger, like she didn't recognize me anymore. "You're disgusting," she said finally. "I don't ever want to see you again." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on my couch with her words echoing in my head. "You're disgusting. I don't ever want to see you again." How had things escalated so quickly? How had I gone from being her closest confidant to the villain in her marriage? I tried to piece it together, but nothing made sense. I hadn't seen or spoken to Aaron outside of family gatherings, and I couldn't think of any reason he would lie about me like this. The texts were damning, sure, but they didn't match my tone. They didn't even sound like me. Still, it wasn't hard to see why Rachel believed them. The next morning, the fallout began. My mom called, her voice tight with disappointment. "We need to talk," she said. "I didn't do it," I said, cutting her off before she could get started. "That's not what Rachel says," she replied. "And Aaron, he wouldn't lie about something like this." "Are you serious?" I said, my voice rising. "Mom, I didn't send those texts." "Someone's framing me." "Why would anyone go through all that trouble?" she asked. "This isn't about me or your father. It's between you and Rachel, and I think you owe her an apology." The conversation left me feeling gutted. My parents, the people who were supposed to know me better than anyone, didn't believe me. Rachel blocked me on social media, and mutual friends started sending me awkward, concerned messages. "Hey, is everything okay? Rachel's been saying some pretty wild stuff about you." By the end of the week, I was officially the family pariah. Thanksgiving was awkward as hell. My parents invited Rachel and Aaron, but made it clear I wasn't welcome. It was surreal, like being excommunicated from my own life. Then came a call from Aaron. I wasn't expecting it. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hey," he said, his tone neutral. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry this all came out the way it did." I scoffed. "You mean the way you made it come out?" "Look," he said, sighing. "I didn't mean for things to get so out of hand. I don't know. Maybe I misinterpreted things." "Misinterpreted what?" I snapped. "Aaron, I didn't send those texts." "Maybe you didn't mean to," he said cryptically. Sometimes emotions come out in ways we don't expect. That line stayed with me long after the call ended. It was so carefully worded, so deliberate. Aaron wasn't apologizing. He was planting a seed of doubt, trying to convince me that I might actually be the problem. It was manipulative as hell, and for the first time, I started to wonder if Aaron was hiding more than just a few fake texts. I didn't know it yet, but that call was the first crack in the armor. It was the moment I realized Aaron wasn't just a bystander in this mess. He was the one pulling the strings. By the end of that week, My life felt unrecognizable. I couldn't go a single day without some reminder of how my family had turned on me. Rachel's accusations spread like wildfire, not just through our family, but into our wider social circles. Friends who I hadn't spoken to in months were messaging me, subtly trying to pry, as if they were fishing for juicy gossip. "You okay?" One of my high school friends, Melissa, texted. "Saw something about you and Aaron. Hope it's not true. Hope it's not true." Even it felt like a punch in the gut. The fact that anyone thought it could be true was devastating. But the worst part was my parents. My mom, always the peacemaker, called me for the third time that week, repeating the same patronizing nonsense. "Sweetheart, you know we love you, but Rachel's been through a lot. Maybe you should just apologize and let this all blow over." "Apologize for what, Mom?" I snapped. "For something I didn't do. Do you even realize how insane this sounds? Aaron's lying, and you're letting him get away with it." "Why would Aaron lie?" she asked, genuinely confused. "He has no reason to make this up. And Rachel's your sister. Do you really think she'd believe him if there wasn't some truth to it?" I hung up. I couldn't deal with it anymore. Over the next few weeks, I felt like I was living in a nightmare. Rachel had cut me off completely, and any attempts to reach her were met with silence. My parents were walking on eggshells around the situation, but their silence spoke volumes. They didn't believe me. Not really. The only thing that kept me going was a nagging feeling in the back of my mind. Aaron's phone call still didn't sit right with me. The way he talked about misinterpreting emotions felt calculated, like he was trying to control the narrative. And then there was the matter of those texts. The language, the phrasing, it was all too perfect, too damning. I decided to dig deeper. If Aaron had gone to such lengths to frame me, there had to be something he was hiding. The only problem was figuring out where to start. One night, I got my first real lead. A friend of mine, Claire, worked in the same office as Aaron. She called me out of the blue and said, "Look, I don't know what's going on, but something about Aaron has been sketchy lately. He's been taking a lot of calls outside, and he's left work early a few times without saying why. Some of us think he's having an affair." Hearing those words felt like confirmation of something I'd been too scared to say out loud. Aaron was hiding something, and he was using me as a smokescreen to keep Rachel from finding out. The next day, I decided to follow him. I knew where he worked and where he usually went for lunch, so it wasn't hard to track him down. Sure enough, around 5 p.m., he left the office and drove to a small bar across town. What I didn't expect was to see him meet up with another woman. I watched from a distance, my heart pounding as I snapped a few photos on my phone. They weren't just sitting and chatting. They were leaning in close, laughing, touching each other's hands, stuff that screamed not platonic. It was surreal. Part of me felt vindicated. This was proof that Aaron was lying, that he was the real problem in his marriage. But another part of me felt sick. This was Rachel's husband, the man she trusted, the man she chose to believe over me. The next morning, I debated whether to tell Rachel what I'd seen. On the one hand, I wanted to shove the evidence in her face and say, "See? I told you it wasn't me." On the other hand, I knew how fragile she was. If I handled this wrong, it could backfire, and I'd lose any chance of repairing our relationship. In the end, I decided to wait. I wanted to gather more proof, something undeniable that would force her to confront the truth. What I didn't realize was that Aaron was already a step ahead of me. That afternoon, I got a call from my dad. "Rachel told us what you've been up to," he said, his voice tight with anger. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "She said you've been stalking Aaron, following him to work, taking pictures of him. Do you have any idea how creepy that is?" My blood ran cold. Aaron must have seen me at the bar. And now he was spinning the narrative again, painting me as some obsessed lunatic. I tried to explain, but my dad cut me off. "Look, whatever's going on with you, you need to stop. You're making this worse for everyone." Click. I stared at my phone, feeling utterly defeated. Aaron wasn't just lying. He was playing a game, and he was winning. I wasn't sure how much more of this I could take. I was standing in the wreckage of my reputation, with my family fully convinced I was not only trying to destroy Rachel's marriage, but now actively stalking Aaron. I couldn't even tell what hurt more, the lies or the fact that no one seemed to question them. But something about Aaron's accusation set off alarms in my head. He had seen me at the bar, and instead of panicking or covering his tracks, he went on the offensive. That wasn't the move of an innocent man trying to avoid suspicion. That was the move of someone confident he could spin the situation to his advantage. I knew I couldn't let this go. Whatever Aaron was hiding had to be big enough for him to go to these lengths. I just didn't know how far I was willing to go to uncover it. The next day, I decided to reach out to Claire again. I told her everything, well, almost everything. I left out the part about following Aaron to the bar, knowing how bad that would sound. Instead, I focused on the accusations and the fake texts. Claire didn't seem surprised. Honestly, it tracks, she said. Aaron's always been slippery. He's good at covering his tracks, but I've seen him mess up once or twice. What do you mean? I asked, my heart pounding. Well, she said, hesitating, there was this one time a few months ago when he left his phone at his desk. A text popped up, and it wasn't from Rachel. It was from someone named Jessie, and it was definitely not a work-related conversation. That name stuck with me. Jessie. Was she the woman I'd seen at the bar? I had no way of knowing, but at least now I had a lead. I spent the next week trying to figure out how to connect the dots. I went back to the bar a couple of times, hoping to spot Aaron or Jessie again, but no luck. Frustration started to build, and for a moment I thought about giving up. But then I got an email. It was from an anonymous address, and the subject line simply read, "You deserve the truth." I almost deleted it, thinking it was spam, but curiosity got the better of me, and when I opened it, I found a string of screenshots. Text messages between Aaron and Jessie. Explicit ones that made it clear their relationship had been going on for a long time. I stared at the screen, my heart racing. Who had sent this? And why now? The answer came in the last line of the email. Aaron's been lying to everyone, including you. He's dangerous. Be careful. No signature. No clue who it was from. But whoever they were, they knew something. Armed with the screenshots, I debated my next move. Part of me wanted to go straight to Rachel and shove them in her face, but I knew that wouldn't work. She wouldn't believe me, especially now that Aaron had convinced her I was stalking him. So instead, I decided to confront Aaron directly. I waited until he left work one evening and intercepted him in the parking lot. He looked genuinely startled to see me. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his tone sharp. "We need to talk," I said, holding up my phone with the screenshots pulled up. His face paled for a split second before he quickly composed himself. "Where did you get those?" "Doesn't matter," I said. "What matters is that I know. I know about Jessie, and I know you've been using me to cover your tracks." Aaron's jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might try to deny it. But then he laughed, a cold, humorless sound that sent chills down my spine. "You think this changes anything?" he said, stepping closer. "Rachel will never believe you. And even if she does, who's she going to blame? Me? Or the sister she already thinks is obsessed with her husband?" I didn't have an answer. Aaron's confidence was unnerving. He wasn't just manipulative, he was calculated. And he was right. Rachel wouldn't believe me, not unless I could prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that he had been lying all along. As he walked away, I realized I was playing a much bigger game than I'd thought. Aaron wasn't just trying to protect himself. He was trying to destroy me. And if I wasn't careful, he'd succeed. But what Aaron didn't know was that I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. After my confrontation with Aaron, I felt more determined than ever. His smug confidence was infuriating, but it also told me one thing. He thought he was untouchable. That arrogance, I knew, would eventually be his downfall. I just needed the right evidence. The mysterious email had given me a crucial lead, Jessie. But beyond her name, I had nothing to go on. I scoured social media for hours, searching every Jessie I could find who was remotely connected to Aaron's workplace or personal life. Finally, I found her. Jessie was tagged in a photo from a recent office party, standing just a little too close to Aaron for comfort. Her profile wasn't private, and as I scrolled through her photos, it didn't take long to confirm what I suspected. There were no overt signs of a relationship, no selfies together or romantic captions, but there were plenty of subtle clues. Matching locations, shared inside jokes in the comments, and even a picture of Aaron's unmistakable watch sitting on a table next to a glass of wine. I needed to contact her, but I had to be smart about it. If she was complicit in Aaron's lies, she could tip him off. But if she wasn't, well, she might be the key to exposing him. I decided to send her a message. "Hi, Jessie, I think we might have someone in common, Aaron. I have some questions, and I think you might have answers. Please let me know if you're willing to talk." For a day, I heard nothing. I started to lose hope, thinking she'd either ignored the message or blocked me. But then late the next night, I got a reply. "What do you want?" It wasn't exactly friendly, but it was a start. I replied, "I need to know the truth about Aaron. He's been using me to cover for his lies, and I think you're part of it, whether you realize it or not." Her response came quickly. "Meet me tomorrow at noon. The coffee shop on 5th. The next day, I arrived 10 minutes early, nerves making my hands shake. Jessie walked in exactly on time, her expression unreadable. She was younger than I expected, probably in her late 20s, with a sharp, no-nonsense demeanor. "You've got 5 minutes," she said, sitting down across from me. I didn't waste time. Aaron has been framing me for months. He made my family believe I was trying to ruin his marriage, and he's used me as a scapegoat for his affair. I just need to know, were you in on it? Jessie's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, she looked genuinely surprised. He told me you were obsessed with him, she said finally, that you wouldn't leave him alone, and that's why he had to keep things quiet. My stomach turned. Did you ever see the messages he claimed were from me? She nodded. Yeah, he showed me a few. They were explicit. I leaned forward. Jessie, those messages were fake. He faked them to make me look guilty. I've never sent him anything like that. Her expression shifted, doubt creeping into her eyes. He's been lying to you too, I said. I'm just trying to prove it. Jessie hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. He always said he had to delete everything because of you, she said. But I kept some of the messages. She handed me her phone, and as I scrolled through the texts, my hand shook. There was proof that Aaron had used my name as part of his cover. He referred to me by name in several messages, saying things like, "She's been texting me again. I can't risk her finding out about us. That son of a," I muttered, gripping the phone. Jessie looked genuinely shaken. I didn't know it was this bad, she said quietly. I thought he was protecting me. No, I said. He was protecting himself. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was one step ahead. With Jessie on my side, I had the leverage I needed to expose Aaron's lies. But I also knew he wouldn't go down without a fight. Later that night, I gathered everything I had, Jessie's texts, the photos of Aaron at the bar, the screenshots from the anonymous email, and started drafting a letter to Rachel. I had to handle this carefully. If I came at her with accusations, she'd shut down. When I finished, I stared at the message for a long time before hitting send. I didn't sleep that night, wondering how she'd react, if she'd even believe me. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Rachel. We need to talk. My heart sank and soared at the same time. This was it, the moment of truth. But I had no idea whether it would bring my family back together or tear us apart for good. Rachel arrived at my apartment later that afternoon, her face pale and her lips pressed into a tight line. She didn't say a word as she walked in, clutching her phone in one hand and her bag in the other. Her silence was unnerving, but I didn't push. Instead, I motioned for her to sit down while I perched awkwardly on the edge of the couch. I read your email, she finally said, her voice brittle. And I don't know what to believe anymore. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Rachel, I've been trying to tell you from the beginning. Those texts Aaron showed you weren't from me. I would never do that to you. She looked down at her phone, scrolling absently, before holding it up for me to see. He sent me more messages this morning, she said. From you? My stomach dropped. I reached for the phone and read the texts. They were just like the ones she'd shown me before. Intimate, suggestive, and cruel. But this time there was something off. One of the messages mentioned an event I wasn't even aware of. Rachel, I said, handing the phone back. These messages are fake. He's still doing it. Even now, to keep you from believing me. Her eyes flickered with doubt, but she didn't speak. I pulled out my own phone and showed her everything I'd gathered. The screenshots from Jessie, the photos of Aaron at the bar, the texts he'd sent Jessie using my name as a cover. Rachel's expression shifted from confusion to shock, then to a cold, simmering anger. Jessie, she asked, her voice tight. She's the one he's been seeing, I said. She thought she was the only other woman until I showed her what he's been doing to me. Rachel stared at the evidence, her hand trembling as she scrolled through the screenshots. Her face turned pale, and for a moment I thought she might break down right there. He lied to me, she whispered, more to herself than to me. Yes, I said gently, and he used me to cover for it. Rachel's silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she stood up, her jaw clenched. I need to talk to him, she said, her voice steady but cold. Rachel, be careful, I said, standing as well. He's manipulative. He'll try to twist this back on me or on you. You need to stay calm and stick to the facts. She nodded, but her eyes were distant, like her mind was already racing ahead to the confrontation. Without another word, she left. I spent the next few hours pacing my apartment, my nerves shot. I couldn't stop imagining how the conversation would play out between Rachel and Aaron. Would he confess? Would she believe him over me yet again? When my phone buzzed, I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was a text from Rachel. Come to Mom and Dad's. Now. I arrived at my parents' house to find Rachel, Aaron, and my parents all sitting in the living room. The tension in the air was palpable. Rachel's eyes were red, and Aaron looked disheveled, his usual smug confidence replaced with something closer to panic. You have something to say? Rachel said, motioning for me to speak. I hesitated, glancing around the room. My parents looked uncomfortable, like they'd rather be anywhere else. But I knew this was my chance, and I wasn't going to waste it. I laid everything out. How Aaron had used my name to cover his affair, the text Jesse had kept, the photos from the bar, and the email I'd received. Rachel didn't interrupt me once, but my parents exchanged wary glances, as if trying to process what they were hearing. When I finished, Aaron finally spoke. "This is ridiculous," he said, his voice shaky but defiant. "You're just trying to turn Rachel against me because you're jealous." "Enough, Aaron," Rachel snapped, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. "I already talked to Jessie. She told me everything." The color drained from Aaron's face. For a moment, the room was dead silent. Then my dad, who had been sitting with his arms crossed, leaned forward. "Is this true?" he asked Aaron, his tone low and dangerous. Aaron opened his mouth to protest, but no words came out. He looked at Rachel, then at me, and for the first time, he seemed to realize he had no way out. "Yes," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. My mom gasped, covering her mouth with her hand, and Rachel let out a bitter laugh. "Unbelievable," she said, standing up and grabbing her coat. I'm done. I'm done with this marriage. And I'm done with you." She walked out of the room without looking back, leaving Aaron sitting there, his head in his hands. My parents didn't say much as I gathered my things to leave. My mom muttered an apology, and my dad patted me awkwardly on the shoulder, but I could tell they didn't know how to process everything that had happened. As I walked out the door, I felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. I had finally cleared my name, but it had come at a cost. Rachel's marriage was over. My parents' trust in Aaron was shattered, and our family would probably never be the same. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. The house was eerily quiet as I walked out, leaving the fallout behind. The relief of clearing my name was fleeting. The damage Aaron had done wasn't going to disappear overnight, and the thought of Rachel's shattered expression lingered in my mind long after I drove away. 2 days later, Rachel called me. It was the first time she'd reached out since the confrontation, and I didn't know what to expect. Was she angry? Regretful? I hesitated before answering. "Hey," she said softly, her voice hoarse from crying. "Hey," I replied. There was a long pause before she spoke again. "I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. For believing him over you." Hearing her say those words was like a weight lifting off my chest. "Rachel, it wasn't your fault. He manipulated you. He manipulated all of us." She sniffled. "It doesn't excuse what I said to you, how I treated you. I should have trusted you, but I didn't, and I don't think I'll ever forgive myself for that." We talked for over an hour. She told me how Aaron had tried one last time to spin the situation after I left, blaming Jesse, blaming me, blaming anyone but himself. But Rachel wasn't buying it anymore. "I filed for divorce this morning," she said finally, her voice steadier. "I can't be with someone who could do something like this." I felt a pang of sadness for her. No matter how terrible Aaron had been, I knew this wasn't the life Rachel had imagined for herself. Meanwhile, my parents were having a harder time processing what had happened. My mom called me a few days later, her voice thick with guilt. "I don't know how we let it get this far," she said. "I should have seen through him, but I wanted so badly to believe that he was perfect." I finished for her. "We all did." She apologized profusely for not believing me, for taking Rachel and Aaron's side, for all the hurtful things she and my dad had said. It was the apology I'd been waiting for, but I didn't feel the satisfaction I expected. "I forgive you, Mom," I said, and I meant it. "But things can't go back to the way they were overnight. It's going to take time." Then, just when I thought the worst was behind us, something unexpected happened. Jessie called me. "I thought you should know," she said, her tone grim. "Aaron reached out to me last night. He wanted to meet up." My stomach twisted. "Why?" He didn't say, but I think he's trying to get me to backtrack on what I told Rachel. "He's desperate." "Desperate for what?" "To save face," she replied. "To make me the villain, just like he did to you." Her warning sent a chill through me. Aaron wasn't done playing his games, even with his marriage in ruins. I told Jessie to be careful, to document everything, and not to let him manipulate her the way he had manipulated so many others. But deep down, I knew Aaron wouldn't go quietly. The next week, Rachel found a letter taped to her front door. It was from Aaron, begging her to reconsider, claiming he'd been misunderstood and forced to act out of fear because of me. She sent me a photo of the letter, furious and bewildered. "I can't believe he's still trying to pin this on you," she said. "That's who he is," I replied. "He'll never admit what he's done, not fully." Rachel filed for a restraining order the next day, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Aaron wasn't finished. He had spent so much time and energy building a web of lies, and now that it was unraveling, he was flailing, trying to grasp onto anything that might keep him in control. And then came the phone call that shook everything. It was late, and I was just starting to feel like I could relax when my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, but something compelled me to answer. "Is this my name?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes." "Who's this?" "This is Megan. I'm Aaron's ex. From before Rachel." I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. "Why are you calling me?" "I heard what happened," she said, "and I think there's something you should know. Aaron did the same thing to me. The fake texts, the accusations, everything. He ruined my relationship with my sister." Her words hit me like a freight train. Aaron's behavior wasn't just a one-time thing. It was a pattern. And I had a sinking feeling Rachel wasn't the last person he'd target. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Because he's dangerous," Megan said. "And if you think this is over, you're wrong." Her warning echoed in my mind long after the call ended. The more I learned about Aaron, the more I realized how deep his manipulation went. This wasn't just about me or Rachel. It was about a man who thrived on control and chaos. I didn't know what his next move would be, but one thing was clear. Aaron wasn't done yet. Megan's call had left me shaken. I couldn't stop replaying her words in my head. "He's dangerous. And if you think this is over, you're wrong." I wanted to believe she was exaggerating, that Aaron's manipulative schemes would fade now that Rachel had filed for divorce. But deep down, I knew better. Rachel, however, was done letting Aaron control her life. She forwarded me a series of emails Aaron had sent her in the days following the restraining order. They were desperate, erratic, and dripping with self-pity. "You're overreacting," one of them read. "I'm not the villain here. Your sister is." Another email was even more unsettling. "You might want to think twice before turning your back on me. Families have secrets. Do you really want yours out in the open?" Rachel asked me what I thought he meant. I told her I didn't know, but the truth was his words left a pit in my stomach. Aaron didn't strike me as someone who made empty threats. A week later, my parents invited Rachel and me to dinner. It was the first time we'd all been in the same room since the fallout, and the tension was palpable. My mom tried to keep the mood light, asking Rachel about her job and me about my weekend plans, but it was clear neither of us was in the mood for small talk. It didn't take long for the conversation to turn to Aaron. "I still can't believe it," my dad said, shaking his head. "I trusted that guy with everything." "He's a liar," Rachel said flatly. "He's always been a liar." I nodded in agreement, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something. Aaron had been too calm, too calculated in the aftermath of his exposure. He was planning something, I just didn't know what. As if on cue, my mom's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her face turning pale. "Oh no," she whispered. "What is it?" I asked, leaning over to look. She held up her phone, revealing a forwarded email. It was from Aaron. The subject line read, "The truth about my name." My blood ran cold. Rachel grabbed the phone and opened the email. It was a rambling, unhinged tirade, filled with accusations that were as ridiculous as they were infuriating. Aaron claimed that I had been obsessed with him for years, that I had a history of unstable behavior, and that I had driven a wedge between Rachel and the rest of the family out of jealousy. The email ended with a chilling line. "You might think you've won, but I have proof. You're not as innocent as you seem." "Proof of what?" Rachel asked, her voice tight with anger. "What is he talking about?" I had no idea, but the email was clearly designed to rattle me, and it was working. Over the next few days, I noticed strange things happening. My social media accounts were flooded with fake messages from anonymous profiles, accusing me of everything from stalking to theft. My work email received a series of anonymous complaints, alleging I had unprofessional relationships with clients. I tried to brush it off, but it became harder to ignore when one of my coworkers pulled me aside. "Hey," she said hesitantly, "is everything okay? Someone called the office asking about you, and it sounded weird. What did they say?" I asked, my heart racing. "They just asked a lot of questions. If you were reliable, if you'd ever been disciplined." It was really specific. I didn't need to ask who it was. Aaron was ramping up his campaign against me, and he wasn't being subtle about it. That night, Rachel called me in a panic. "He's gone too far this time," she said. "What happened?" She sent me a screenshot of a social media post Aaron had made earlier that evening. It was a photo of an old family picture, one that included both of us, and a caption that read, "When family turns toxic, sometimes you have to expose the truth." Stay tuned. The comments were already piling up, with people speculating about what he meant. Some of them were clearly from his friends, egging him on, but others were strangers, latching onto the drama like vultures circling a carcass. He's trying to humiliate us, Rachel said, her voice shaking. No, I said, staring at the post. He's trying to humiliate me. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Megan. It was short and to the point. You need to call me. Now. When I called her, she didn't waste time on pleasantries. Aaron's been digging, she said. He reached out to me again, asking about your family history. Specifically, if there were any skeletons in the closet. My heart sank. Did you tell him anything? Of course not, she said. But I think he's trying to find something he can use against you. You need to be ready. I thanked her and hung up, my mind racing. Aaron wasn't just trying to smear me. He was trying to destroy me. And the worst part was, I didn't know what he'd uncover. Every family has secrets, and I had no way of knowing how far he'd go to dig them up. One thing was clear. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The days that followed Megan's warning felt like living under siege. Aaron had gone silent, but it wasn't the kind of silence that felt like a victory. It was the calm before a storm. His ominous social media post had vanished, along with all the comments and speculation, but I knew better than to think he'd back down. Rachel and I were on edge, both of us hyper-aware of the ticking time bomb Aaron seemed to be building. We spent hours on the phone, trying to piece together what he might have meant by proof. Rachel even started digging into old family documents and photos, desperate to find anything that might have been misinterpreted. Then, the email came. It hit my inbox late one night, just as I was starting to feel like things might calm down. The subject line read, "The truth." I hesitated for a long moment before opening it, my stomach in knots. Inside were scanned copies of old documents, family records, birth certificates, and court papers. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then my breath caught. One of the documents was a hospital record, listing my mother as a patient and naming a child born years before Rachel and me. A child I had never heard of. My heart raced as I called Rachel. The image is still open on my laptop. She answered on the first ring, her voice groggy with sleep. What's going on? I just got an email, I said. You need to see this. I forwarded her the documents and waited in silence as she opened them on her end. The line went quiet, and for a moment, I thought she'd hung up. Finally, she spoke. This doesn't make sense. Mom never said anything about another child. I know, I said. But why would Aaron have this? And why now? Rachel's voice was sharp when she replied. He's using it to hurt us. He's trying to dig up whatever he can to make us look bad. It made sense, but it didn't make it any less horrifying. If Aaron had found this, what else was he capable of uncovering? The next morning, Rachel and I met at my apartment to go through the documents together. There wasn't much to go on, just a name, a date, and a hospital in another state. We debated whether to confront our parents, but Rachel was hesitant. What if they didn't want us to know? She asked. Then why is Aaron using it against us? I shot back. We need answers. Rachel finally agreed, and that evening, we showed up unannounced at our parents' house. Mom opened the door, her face lighting up with surprise before fading into worry. Is everything okay? She asked. No, Rachel said bluntly, stepping inside. We need to talk. We sat in the living room, the documents laid out on the coffee table. Mom and Dad stared at them in stunned silence. Where did you get these? Dad asked, his voice low. That's not the question, Rachel said. The question is, why didn't you tell us about this? Mom looked at Dad, her hands trembling. We didn't think it mattered anymore, she said. It was so long ago, and we thought it was better to move on. You thought it was better? I asked, my voice rising. You thought we wouldn't care that we had another sibling out there somewhere? Dad sighed heavily. It's not that simple. Your brother, he was adopted by another family. We thought it was the best thing for everyone at the time. Rachel and I sat in stunned silence. A brother. We had a brother, and we'd never known. As the shock began to settle, my mind turned back to Aaron. How did he find out? I asked. Mom shook her head. I don't know. We never told anyone. The only people who knew were us and the adoption agency. He's using it against us, Rachel said bitterly. He's trying to make us look like liars, like our family's some big, shameful secret. Dad's face hardened. That man has no right to dig into our past like this. I'll call a lawyer if I have to. But I wasn't so sure it would be that simple. Aaron was relentless, and now that he had this information, I couldn't shake the feeling that he had something even bigger planned. That night, I went home feeling like my entire world had shifted. I couldn't stop thinking about the brother I'd never known, about the choices my parents had made, and about the way Aaron was twisting it all into a weapon. Then, as I lay in bed, my phone buzzed. It was another email, this time with no subject line. Inside was a single sentence. If you want to know the whole story, Meet me tomorrow. Same bar? 8 p.m. It was from Aaron. My hands shook as I stared at the screen. I didn't know what he was playing at, but one thing was clear. The game wasn't over yet. The next evening, I sat parked outside the bar, staring at the neon sign flickering faintly in the dim light. My heart was racing, my palms clammy against the steering wheel. Aaron's email had been vague, almost taunting, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a trap. Part of me wanted to turn around and leave, but the rest of me, the part that had been dragged through weeks of hell, needed answers. If Aaron wanted to talk, I was going to make him tell me everything. I walked into the bar at exactly 8 p.m. It wasn't crowded, but the low hum of conversation and clinking glasses filled the air. Aaron was already there, sitting in a corner booth with a drink in his hand. He looked calm, too calm, and it made my stomach churn. "You came," he said as I approached, a smug smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Cut the small talk," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. "What do you want?" Aaron leaned back, swirling his drink lazily. "I thought you might want to hear the truth. The real truth, not the sanitized version your parents gave you." My fist clenched under the table. "If you know something, just say it. I don't have time for your games." He smirked, taking a slow sip before speaking. "You and Rachel are so predictable. You think you've uncovered some dark family secret, but you're not even scratching the surface. What are you talking about?" I snapped. Aaron leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Your brother. He wasn't adopted because your parents couldn't take care of him. He was adopted because your father didn't want him around." My breath hitched. "What are you talking about?" "Your mom had an affair," Aaron said bluntly. "Your brother isn't your dad's kid. That's why they gave him up, to save their precious little family image." The words hit me like a freight train. I stared at Aaron, searching his face for any sign of deceit, but his expression was maddeningly unreadable. "You're lying," I said, my voice shaking. "Am I?" he said, arching an eyebrow. "Think about it. Why else would they keep it a secret for all these years? Why else would they cut all ties with him?" I didn't want to believe him, but his words planted a seed of doubt that I couldn't ignore. "You've been digging through our family's past just to hurt us," I said, trying to steady my voice. "Why? What do you get out of this?" Aaron's smile widened. "Because I don't lose. You and Rachel thought you could destroy my life, but I'm not going down without taking you all with me." "You destroyed your own life," I shot back. "Rachel left you because of what you did, not because of me." Aaron's smirk faltered for the briefest moment, but he quickly recovered. "Believe what you want," he said, standing up and tossing a few bills onto the table. "But if I were you, I'd start asking your parents some hard questions. You might not like the answers." I sat there long after he left, my mind racing. Could Aaron be telling the truth? It seemed too outrageous, too cruel, even for him. But the doubt gnawed at me, and by the time I drove home, I knew I couldn't ignore it. The next day, I called Rachel and told her everything. She was silent for a long time before finally saying, "We need to talk to them." Together. That evening, we showed up at our parents' house again, the tension between us almost suffocating. Mom looked surprised to see us, but quickly ushered us inside. "What's going on?" she asked nervously. I didn't bother with pleasantries. "We need to know the truth about our brother," I said. And this time, no half-truths. Mom and Dad exchanged a look, one that made my stomach drop. "What did Aaron tell you?" Dad asked, his voice unusually sharp. "Enough to make us wonder why you've been lying to us," Rachel said, her voice trembling. "Was he right? Is our brother not Dad's son?" The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Mom broke down, tears streaming down her face. "It's true," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I had an affair. It was a mistake, a horrible mistake. But when I found out I was pregnant, I knew I couldn't keep him." Dad's face was stony, his hands clenched into fists. "I forgave her," he said quietly. "But I couldn't raise another man's child. We decided it was best to give him up and move on." Rachel and I were stunned into silence. The weight of their confession was suffocating, and for a moment, I didn't know what to say. Finally, Rachel spoke. "Does he even know about us?" Mom shook her head. "We never contacted him after the adoption. We thought it was better that way." "Better for who?" I asked bitterly. Neither of them had an answer. As we left that night, Rachel and I were both reeling. Aaron's revelation had torn open wounds we didn't even know existed, and our parents' decision to keep it hidden felt like another betrayal. But the most troubling part was the question we couldn't answer. How had Aaron found out in the first place? And more importantly, what else did he know? Akel and I didn't speak much on the drive back from our parents' house. The truth about our brother was a heavy weight on both of us, and it felt like the ground beneath our family had shifted irreparably. I kept replaying Aaron's smug words in my head. You're not even scratching the surface. I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't done. This wasn't just about revenge for him anymore. It was about control, about proving he could still pull the strings. And if he had gone this far, what else might he have planned? The answer came sooner than I expected. The next morning, Rachel called me, her voice shaking. Aaron posted something, she said, barely able to get the words out. What did he post? I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. Everything, she said. He posted everything. I opened my phone, my hands trembling as I navigated to Aaron's social media profile. There it was, a long post accompanied by photos of the documents he had emailed me, plus a caption that read, "Sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction." Turns out the perfect family wasn't so perfect after all. The comments were already piling up. Strangers speculating, friends expressing shock, and a few people even tagging Rachel and me, asking if it was true. My heart raced as I scrolled through the mess, trying to make sense of it. Rachel's name was trending locally, and so was mine. People were digging into our lives, making wild assumptions about our family, and some were even accusing us of being complicit in the secret adoption. Rachel called again. "This is a nightmare," she said, her voice breaking. "He's dragging our family through the mud just to hurt us. We need to get it taken down," I said, already drafting an email to the platform support team. But even as I hit send, I knew the damage was already done. Aaron's post had gone viral, and there was no way to erase what people had seen. That afternoon, I went to Rachel's apartment to strategize. We sat on her couch, scrolling through the comments, trying to figure out how to respond. "Do we issue a statement?" Rachel asked. "Or would that just make things worse?" "I don't know," I admitted. "If we say nothing, it looks like we're hiding something. But if we say too much, it could blow up even more." Rachel buried her face in her hands. "I just wanted to stop. Why won't he let this go?" Before I could answer, there was a knock at the door. Rachel stiffened, her eyes widening with fear. "Do you think it's him?" I shook my head. He wouldn't show up here. But when she opened the door, it wasn't Aaron. It was a man in his late 30s, with Rachel's eyes and my jawline. He said awkwardly, shifting on his feet. I think I might be your brother." The room fell silent. Rachel and I exchanged stunned looks before stepping aside to let him in. He introduced himself as Mark and explained that he had seen Aaron's post. "I always wondered about my birth family," he said, his voice shaky. "But I never expected to find out this way." Rachel gestured for him to sit, and we all settled into an awkward circle in the living room. Mark told us about his life, his adoptive parents, his job as a teacher, his wife, and 2 kids. He seemed kind, grounded, and completely blindsided by the situation. "I don't know why Aaron would do this," he said. "But if it's true, if we're really siblings, I thought I should at least meet you." Rachel and I filled him in on everything. Our parents' confession, Aaron's vendetta, and how it all spiraled out of control. Mark listened intently, his expression shifting between curiosity and disbelief. "I don't blame you," he said finally. "None of this is your fault. But Aaron, he sounds dangerous." The next day, Rachel and I met with a lawyer to discuss our options. Aaron's post had caused irreparable damage, and while suing him might not undo the harm, it was clear he needed to face consequences for his actions. The lawyer was sympathetic but cautious. "Defamation cases are tricky," she said. "You'd have to prove that his statements caused measurable harm. And even then, the court of public opinion might not be on your side." Despite the risks, Rachel was determined. "He's not going to get away with this," she said. "Not after everything he's done." That evening, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I needed to. "Hello? Enjoying the chaos?" It was Aaron. My blood ran cold. "What do you want?" I snapped. "To remind you that I'm not done," he said, his voice calm and menacing. "You think you've won because you've exposed me, but you're wrong. This is just the beginning." I clenched the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "You've already lost everything, Aaron. Rachel's gone. Your lies are exposed. What else do you have to lose?" Aaron laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You'll see," he said before hanging up. In the weeks that followed, Rachel, Mark, and I started to rebuild. We decided to confront the media storm together, releasing a joint statement about our family's history and emphasizing our unity in the face of Aaron's lies. The statement didn't erase the damage, but it helped shift the narrative away from Aaron's smear campaign. Our parents reached out to Mark, and while the reunion was strained, it was clear they wanted to make amends. For the first time in a long time, it felt like our family might find a way to heal.